Welcome to By the Books, the podcast helping business owners navigate the complex world of business, tax, and bookkeeping. Now, to the owner and president of Sakline, Lindsay Kline.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. This is Lindsay Kline with Sakline, the host of By the Books, and I am here today with Tony Harmon, a CPA and attorney. He's been practicing with business owners for over 20 years, working on accounting and tax consults and tax strategies and probably so much more that I can't even think of right now. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I'm glad to be here and look forward to our time, see what we can uncover.
So Tony is someone that I have utilized as a resource pretty often. I think first whenever I have a question come up, because you have such a wealth of experience coming from both a legal and a tax side. But you often tell me the answer is always, it depends, which is great because then you can analyze it from different perspectives.
Yeah, right. Everything depends on the facts.
Yes, right. So you have a really interesting topic to talk about today, and it's actually in regards to some proposed legislation that they are calling, if I get this straight, what is it? The
American Families Plan.
American Families Plan. So tell us, does it actually help any American families?
It depends. Depends on where you are. I would say certainly some will benefit and others will not.
Gotcha.
And I think those that will not will probably feel more pain than those who feel help.
Oh, okay. So
That's my view.
Okay. So tell us, what is this proposed legislation? What's it about?
Sure. So let's just start with the gap.
Okay.
Okay. Which is not some place where you go to find jeans or clothes on sale, right? The tax gap is the delta or the difference between what the government says you owe and what the government collects on a timely basis. So that's called the tax gap. Now, this is something that has existed for a long time. It's not something that's new.
So, okay. Let me get this straight. You're saying it's the difference between what the government, the IRS, right? The IRS says you owe.
What they think you owe.
What they think you owe, and what you actually pay.
Timely pay. What's actually timely paid.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So if you pay late, does it not apply to this situation?
It applies, but you're one of those. Not you're adding to the gap.
Gotcha.
Right. If you're a late filer or a non-filer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So is this legislation trying to narrow this gap between the timely paying people and what's actually owed?
That may be the cover story.
Okay.
But as a tax professional and a business owner, who serves business owners, I don't see that being the case.
Okay, interesting.
It actually, so they're intending to close the gap by this legislation. Okay, that's what they say they want to do. But in actuality, what they're really going to do is wind up kind of creating this trail of tears, if you will.
Oh boy.
Okay, because the government plans through its various legislative and administrative tools in its tool belt to increase taxes, increase legislation, and cause basically more pain to the business owner and the person who's considered to be wealthy. There's very I can see it very clearly when the government puts out its publications on what this is intended to do, that it is very targeted at a group of people at a certain level and above.
Okay.
That's very clear when they use terms like these people have opaque sources of income, and they have access to planners and accountants and attorneys that the normal person doesn't have. When there are other things in this legislation that's proposed by the administration, where they're talking about they're increasing the capital gains tax rate.
Okay.
Right. That's another thing that they're a tool in their tool belt that they're looking to accomplish. And I say they, it's the government, it's the administration at this point. Lowering the estate tax exemption, right, and eliminating the basis step up that occurs on passage of property via someone's passing, right? So those are the kinds of things that they're hoping to, add as well as to this legislation. But, if you can imagine, as I'm sure you've had clients, that kind of stuff can be devastating, right? You can lose an entire business. It can be wiped out by virtue of the fact that you got it at, the person who built the business has a low basis in it. And then 40 years later, they pass it on to someone when they, pass. And now the value of it is much higher. So to say that, they're going to only give you $1 million or $3 million of an exemption, whatever that number is going to be, right? You got to pay a lot of tax on that gain, right? So that's going to be very devastating.
Wow.
And it could wipe out entire businesses. I mean, their talk about in some of the legislation or some of it's not legislation yet, but in some of the committees, they're talking about exempting family farmers. Well, yeah, that's absolutely important, but there's also other businesses that should be protected as well. And I don't know that, I don't know how it will pass, if it will pass.
How's it going so far? Where is the status of it at this point?
So the status of the legislation is it's been proposed, and it's going through what's called a scoring procedure. So if you're familiar with scoring, and to your audience, scoring is the process by which the government determines what the impact of legislation is from a revenue perspective. So they've done some scoring, and they're talking about what it might look like, this proposal, that proposal, how do they get it in, who's it's the whole making of the legislative sausage at this point, right? So yeah, that's where we are. But
Okay.
when Congress comes back from its recess, it's on the agenda, and there's talk about this being passed after the government's new fiscal year, which starts October 1. And so that time period between October 1 and December 31 is the point in time where they're talking about passing this American Families Plan. And then, in some cases, there's been mention of it being retroactive.
Oh boy.
So
So how far back would they go? Do you know?
Well, it would be 2021. The exact date, there's some discussion or some, opportunity for interpretation as to when that will be. It could be as early as April 2021.
Wow.
When the government first kind of came out and mentioned this American Families Plan.
Wow.
So
it's really difficult to help your clients plan for something that already has gone into effect in the past.
Exactly. It's near impossible.
Yeah.
I mean, you can start to see what you can glean from, the tea leaves at this point and try to make some suggestions. But, without knowing how Congress is going to actually have what language they're going to use in the statute and what the regulations that may come out a year or two later propose, it's hard, very hard. But if we're thinking about it now and looking into it and reading about it, and it makes our reaction time a little bit faster, right?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So take your average business owner. Let's just say you have someone that has a small business. Maybe they make a couple $100,000 a year in revenue. What would your suggestion be to them if this were to pass? What effect is that going to have on them, and what would you suggest to them to kind of soften the blow, if you will?
Yeah, so that's a hard question to answer right now, because we don't know. Basically, what we're saying, what the planners are saying, is that what's traditionally worked isn't necessarily going to be the the format for the future. So that's the hard part. But here's kind of, let's just, if I may, kind of focus in on who their target is at this point. And so some of the statistics that are involved in this, and so we know what it is. And so then why is it relevant? And that's where the statistics tell a little bit of the story. The other thing is, again, they think that pass-through, that's where a lot of the individuals are. So they're going to attack pass-throughs, which again, that goes against people who are in the business of taking risk and creating something. Here's the other part that's out there. Why I think we're going to see a big ramp up. We just went through the last year and a half of a lot of businesses and a lot of people struggling through the pandemic. And yes, there was government assistance, but there's a lot of people that have not been able to pay payroll taxes, pay income taxes as a result of something going bad. They are now squarely in the crosshairs because of the fact that they had a hardship. There's also other hardships that people have happened to them on a daily basis as well: a death, loss of a job, a divorce, right? Innocent spouse, or someone who is, taking advantage of their situation and other people don't know about it. And so they're just bad actors, but they have a hardship as well. So those are things that I think are concerns that I see in this act.
So what would you propose to people? I mean, especially business owners, because that's who I primarily speak to. What would you recommend to your average business owner that's hearing this? What should they do about this?
Yeah, I think when we get a little more clear picture as to what this legislation is going to look like, we're going to be creative. It's not just me, right? But insurance companies have a stake in this, right? Banks have a stake in this. And so we're going to combine forces, if you will, collectively. The marketplace will come together and we will find a way to get the best out of the situation, And so right now that's a hard thing to say, but there are certain things that, how do you do something? How do you plan against something that's retroactive? That's really hard.
That is hard.
So that's something I don't know. And it's not really fully formed yet. And who knows? I mean, hopefully some senators will have this sense of, I need to be, looking out for people in my district, in my state, and say, no, this isn't good for them. This is, I have a lot of commerce in my state and I don't want to hurt it. So that's what we have to hope for, to see how this all shakes out. Right now, very hard to be able to predict what it's going to be and how to actually go ahead. Like I said earlier, with the language of the statute isn't prepared yet and regulations haven't been issued yet. So hard to say, but keep talking, listening to what is happening in the legislative process to see how we can stay on top of it and what might be something that we can do as we get closer. We're still in July. And as we get closer to Congress coming back in the new fiscal year, we'll start to see more. But, if something goes through the comment period, that's another opportunity for the state bar associations and the ABA and the AICPA and the state CPA societies to really provide input and say, yeah, this is why this isn't bad. This is why this is not good. So that's when we'll really be able to have more of a handle. Unfortunately, I wish I could say that there was more that we could do right now, but I just don't feel comfortable saying what that might be because it could change.
This is the kind of thing that I think if people are against it, they probably should be calling their congressmen or calling their representatives, calling their senators. And I've heard phone call is more valuable than
an email,
like an email, right? Is that true? Have you found that to be the case?
I think certainly if you can get on the phone, that helps. The thing that's interesting, right? You send an email and you get this auto response back, right? It's like, well, what is that?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for telling me. Okay, great. So there is some absolute merit in being able to call someone. Which
I'm sure if you call, you probably get their admin assistant
or
what have you.
Someone on the
but
staff.
They are recording that. And I've heard that they just put more clout in that because if someone takes the time to pick up the phone and call, they consider that to merit a lot more voices. Because if one person is that fired up about it, then there's probably a lot more that didn't pick up the phone that are fired up about it. So that's what I've heard in terms of good strategy. If you do want to voice your protests to this legislation, or maybe even just parts of it, you mentioned that you did like the aspect of getting the technology up to date. And,
important, yeah.
Things like that. So maybe there's just certain aspects of it that we need to voice our opposition to. And, so I would say for anyone that's concerned about those things, get on the phone.
Right. And what we're seeing on the ground, us, you, me, other professionals, that's important for us to be able to have this community, right? And talk about these things. Right. And then we can, as a group, because as I mentioned earlier, right, our lobbying groups in the legal profession and the accounting profession and in the insurance and banking, they're going to be putting forth comments and having things to say as well. So that's always, that multi approach. And again, as we get closer, we will know more. But for now, keep listening, keep thinking about how does that impact me,
I like it. All right. Well, tell everyone where to find you if they would like to talk to you more about this issue or any other tax issue.
So my email address is anthony@harmonkangcpa.com. That's HARMONKANG.CPA.com. Phone number 214-715-6995. Our website is being built right now.
Oh, okay.
So we don't have that yet. So email, phone, best ways to get a hold of me. We are a veteran-owned business as well. When you say we are that same kind of person that we are serving. Nice. We're that small business owner. Yeah. We have the same concerns, with cash flow and with tax liability and, preserving, right, our business that we're building. Mm-hmm. So yeah, Anthony@harmonkangcpa.com, 214-715-6995.
Thank you so much for coming. As always, you're a wealth of knowledge. Always learn something from you every time I talk to you.
Yeah, great.
So
Thanks for having me.
That.
And I get a lot of interesting and thought-provoking kinds of questions from you.
That's what I do best, is ask good questions.
Yeah.
I may not always know the answer, but I can ask the question.
Oh, exactly. I'm in the same boat, right? I don't always know the answer, but stay, keep your ear right down and listen and keep your eyes open.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you to all of our listeners and viewers for joining in today. I am Lindsay Kline with Sakline, Honest, Accurate Bookkeeping Performed on Time. You can reach me at info@sakline.com, SAKLINE.com, and my phone number is 214-396-5020. And we have a new San Antonio office at 210-510-4129. And thank you so much again for joining us. Have a great week, everyone.
By the Books is presented by Sakline. Honest, accurate bookkeeping performed on time. For more information on Sakline services or to get a hold of Lindsay, visit sakline.com or email info@sakline.com.
The information provided on this website and podcast does not and is not intended to constitute legal advice. Instead, all information, content, and materials available are for general information purposes only. Information provided by Sakline may not constitute the most up-to-date legal or other information. Listeners should contact their attorney to obtain advice with respect to any particular legal matter and should refrain from acting on the basis of this information without first seeking legal advice from counsel in the relevant jurisdiction. Only your individual attorney can provide assurances that the information contained herein and your interpretation of it is applicable or appropriate to your particular situation.